Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast with your hosts, Mr. Laz Felipe on this screen, and on the screen opposite me, Mr. Felipe Amarim. How you doing, man?
Doing great. How you doing, man?
Very well, thank you. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I hope you guys had a good week. And yeah,
They're ready. They're wondering why you're dressed up like you are. So would you like to introduce the album that we're going to do today?
yes, exactly. This is the closest I have to a Mexican, or sorry, Texan hat. I could say Mexican as well because they're all neighbors. But yes, so we're talking about a band that once was described as unapologetic Texan. So we're going to talk about ZZ Top. The album is Tres Hombres.
For British people, that's Tres Hombres.
No. I'm going to say with the
Tres Hombres. Can I do that? Can I say Tres Hombres?
Tres
Or is that too
Hombres.
much? Tres Hombres. Okay, there we go. My accent is good, but for our British listeners, I have to do Tres Hombres because we just don't understand it any other way. You see, that's that's the good thing about being half English and half Greek. I can take the mick out of both sides when I want. So there you go. Yeah, as Felipe said, we are doing the album Tres Hombres today by the legendary ZZ Top. The album was released on the July 26th, 1973, recorded in Memphis and Texas. Memphis and Texas. The genres, now I've seen quite a bit of debate here about what you could label the genre of the album as, but here are the most popular ones: Southern rock, blues rock, boogie rock, and Texas blues. So I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. The album lasts 33 and a half minutes, and it was produced by Bill Ham and, importantly, engineered by Terry Manning. And the singles from the album were LA Grange or Lagrange, I don't know which one it is, and Beer Drinkers.
Lagrange.
Lagrange.
So
Lagrange.
It's the name of it.
Oh, I see. So there's Lagrange and Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers. So that's your album info. Felipe, do you want to tell us first why you chose the album?
Well, I was looking for the most, if not the most iconic, the most important album on ZZ Top's career. I chose the band first. Like we need to talk about ZZ Top. I mean, they still are, a gigantic name in rock history, and they made that connection between the roots of rock music and modern rock. And I think, I thought about doing an episode about them, but we decided to do albums. Like we need to talk about albums. There's so much to say about a band that's been around for decades. So this album turned ZZ Top into a big name. That's the main reason. They had two albums before this, and they were not really doing that well. They were not like selling out gigs. They were not famous. They were not like making tons of money out of their gigs and stuff. This album was a game changer. So and for a reason, because the songs are absolutely brilliant, all of them.
Yeah. This is, as you said, this is the one that kick-started ZZ Top's career. This is the third album, right? So they had two before, like you said. What is it you think about this album that made it for them compared to the previous two? What clicked with this one that didn't work previously? In your opinion, of course.
I think the way, okay, I think their sound is more clear. Some people say they invented the Texas blues rock, or whatever you want to call it. So that's like I think was Billy Gibbons who said we did not reinvent the wheel, just made it rounder. So like they didn't actually try to. I think that it's a very honest album. I use that word a lot, like when people are just writing stuff that they really want to write, and they kind of doing a tribute to their influences in many ways, the roots of blues and rock music, but they do it in their own way. They have a style that I think connects every song. I think as an album, it's really solid, start to finish. Again, I always try to pick albums that have no fillers. And I think maybe that's it. Maybe also I think they needed a hit at that point in their career. They needed a song So what's the song that defines ZZ Top? I don't think they had it until Lagrange, which is phenomenal. It's a boogie, and if you don't dance to that riff, there's a you have a problem. If you don't start moving, reacting to if you don't have a physical reaction to that boogie riff, then you probably don't like music at all.
Yeah, something's gone wrong if that's the case. As you said, Lagrange, that's the song that really kick-started it for them, and it's actually the song. So I've not listened to ZZ Top at all, until Lagrange came on, and I was like, oh, of course I've heard this. Like everyone's heard it. I think
Yeah.
it's just one of those iconic riffs that's on a car commercial. When you're watching the adverts on the TV, and it's like the new Ford, whatever, you're gonna have Lagrange sitting behind it because it's like one of those classic rock songs, isn't it?
It is an iconic one, and also they people like using that word. I'm not a big fan, but they stole it from John Lee Hooker.
Okay.
There's a song called Boogie Chillin', which is Boogie Children, but because apparently John Lee Hooker pronounced that word when he was young. He used to say chillin'
Instead of
something like chillin', chillin' instead of children. So the song is called Boogie Children or Boogie Chillin', depending on where you find the song. But the song itself has references on the lyrics to previous blues songs, and that's always a kind of a tricky subject, isn't it? Everyone's like, oh, these guys were stealing from the blues masters and this and that. Yeah, and those guys were also stealing from the guys who came before them. So if you call that stealing, I don't. There was a legal case against the song, and it went nowhere. So it's just like the riff has the same thing. So as we're talking about the song, let's talk about it, because I think that song is the most important one.
Sure.
Maybe not the best, but the most important song in the album. And that riff is a one, what we call one chord blues, isn't it? It doesn't go anywhere. It's the one chord played over and over with a riff on top of it, and it's a boogie, so it has a swing that you can hear in some traditional country music and jazz and blues, which is a shuffle swing. And it's a really like fast-paced song, and I think the vocals are so relaxed. It's like he's talking to you, telling a story.
Yeah, it's very conversational.
Yeah, it's very conversational. Amazingly, there pretty much no lyrics to it. He sings until like probably less than half of the song, and they just jam all the way to the end, which is incredible for a hit song. And it's still one of their favorite songs. That Billy Gibbons still plays that song, and whenever they played, you can see they were having a good time. And another story about that song is that in 2015 they were invited to play in a festival in the town of Lagrange, which is in Texas, and so they literally waited 40 years to play this song in the town that gives the name to the song. So
perfect. Yeah, how poetic.
Yeah, super cool. I mean, yeah,
it's a nice song. I love that they're vamping on this one chord. Like it's musical terms, you could call it vamping, which just means playing a section over and over again, which is this what it does. It just goes round and round, but it doesn't get boring. Did you agree? It doesn't get boring.
Yeah.
The energy there, and I think part of it comes from his conversational vocals, because it's almost like, right, we'll have a conversation, let's talk. Come on, y'all, let's do this. Those little lines he throws in between the verses and everything.
Yeah, exactly. The way he speaks is, again, this thing about being unapologetic Texan, because they were not. They've managed to communicate with the whole of America and the whole world without pretending not to be from a certain part of the country. They've preserved everything they can possibly think of Texan music, and all the roots of Texan music are there. So they have the Texas blues in it all the time. And again, I'm a big fan of blues, as you know. I play in the blues band, and that transition from blues to rock, because not everyone who can actually do it properly, and I think they were really good at that. And I actually have a question for you, okay. If you can possibly think of an answer for this. What do you think makes them more rock than blues? Because I have an impression that although there's loads of blues and traditional American music in it, what do you think makes this a blues, or not a blues band, but a blues rock band or a rock band?
Um, that's a great question. It's something I've kind of thought about having listened to the album multiple times because it does you, each different sections in the album you come away and you're like, okay, this is a bit bluesy, this part. Oh wait, hold on, we've gone to a bit rock. Oh my god, his vocals are a bit soulful there, aren't they? And it's just like you're always going through this cycle of different styles, but
Yeah.
ultimately it is at heart just rock, isn't it? Or like rock and roll, whatever you want to call it. It is a rock album or a rock and roll album. But for me, what makes it rock, I'd have to say it would be rhythms play a big part of it because there is which one was it? Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers. For me, that's like a hard rock slash classic rock track because you've got the heavy rock guitar in the rhythms and riffs. Yes, you've got the blues stops and it's a bit soul-y here and there, but it definitely has a hard rock feel. So, in answer to your question, certain rhythms and guitar tones. Because moments in there, I think if you take out the train drum beat in one song and in the same song you remove the bass just playing dun 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 dun, if you just isolate a riff, it could almost be like a hard rock slash heavy metal riff on its own. It's just what they
You
put
got a good
around
point
it.
there.
It's
Yeah,
just what they put
I
around it. The vocals, the drum beat, the bass line, what they merge around that is what shapes it to be a bit more bluesier. But
yeah,
it is at heart a rock album, I feel.
yeah. I think when you mentioned the guitar tone, yes, that is a big thing.
Yeah.
And I think you can still hear people nowadays playing traditional blues numbers, but with Billy Gibbons sound.
Hmm.
Everyone tries to emulate that guitar sound. Even if you don't know you're
Yeah.
doing, you might be doing.
Yeah,
Sure,
because
the
you heard the other
guitarist
guy
out
do
there,
it.
you might be copying his sound. Yes, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That guitar tone is slightly heavier than things playing that style, and it was a very can I put it? It was a new thing for that time, wasn't it? It wasn't a
Yeah.
normal sort of tone. And they have some. Here's the other thing for me: they were not only looking into the past. I can even hear some elements of British rock in their music, and and then there's a
Yeah.
song specifically that I found that the groove. If you listen to Master of Sparks track 4,
Mm.
the drums are louder in my opinion, than the overall sound of the song and louder than anything else in the album.
I feel like there was a little issue with mixing there because the volume of Master of Sparks when it comes in, it's like two levels higher than the previous three tracks.
That
So I
might have
think
been,
maybe there was an issue, but you're right in general. Um, can I tell you what I thought of that track?
yeah.
Do you know, it really reminds me of the band.
Oh wow.
You've
What is?
got, I'm going to put a song in that says, as usual for listeners, you're going to have the episode playlist in the show notes, which is going to contain the whole of this album and any other songs or tracks we mentioned. I'm going to put in the song Wheels on Fire by the band. And we did our episode on the band. I think it was episode 20 or 22 where we spoke about that band. And for those new
Which
listening,
band?
for those listening who don't know, they are called The Band. So yeah, that's who they are. The vocal style was really soulful. It really had that kind of Richard Manuel tone to it, a kind of like an emotional voice, a thin emotional voice. The keys and organ in the background, that's what I imagine, Garth Hudson does in the band, just putting these little counter melodies really low in the mix, but it's still there.
Yeah.
The unblues like chord progression of Master of Sparks, it didn't feel bluesy. It felt unusual to the rest of the album. And anyway, yeah, it was just a little thing I picked on. It really reminded me of the band. And you got to remember, this album only came out 4 years after the band released Wheels on
Yeah.
Fire. So how far apart are we? You got these Texans who are really trying to kind of emulate the spirit of America. I've just made that up in the sense that they have an American feel to them. It's like a
Yeah.
Southern rock thing, isn't it? Well,
Yeah.
the band weren't that dissimilar. They were trying to they were the pioneers of Americana. So you've got two bands with different sounds trying to emulate or fit in some form of their patriotism in
Yeah.
America. So just like one song that I can link both of them. I don't think anything else sounds like the band, but I just love that there's that one song that I said, I can hear the band in that, and it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I get it. That's interesting. There's a lot of the same. Although they play different music, they have sort of the same influences, isn't it?
Yeah,
And there's something about that point in a band's career where they need to release something really meaningful and commercially relevant, and I think they kind of had a point to prove, and I
yeah.
think they did really well. They only released originally one single, which was La Grunge, and then they started. The Rages started asking for more, so that's how good the album was. So the Rages
Wow.
started picking songs from the album that were not sold to them as singles, you know. So they had one single. That's it.
There you
That's
go. Um,
only chance to get somewhere with this.
we've talked about a couple of songs, but you said to me at the start you wanted to talk about the band a bit first.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
you want to go into that?
yeah. I want to say something about them because if you don't know ZZ Top, you know how they look like. If you have
Yeah.
never listened to their music, and I believe if I'm not mistaken, they still didn't have the beards at this time. This album was
No,
in
one of them did, I think.
1973,
Yeah.
so they're famous for nice hats and gigantic beard.
Great
So
big bushy beard.
do you know anyone like that? Um, so yeah, so basically that iconic look that was Dusty Hill and Billy Gibbons had, it's as remarkable as their music, you know. And I've seen some interviews with Gibbons, and he's super cool about that. It's not like, oh, you should be talking about my music, not about my looks, kind of shit. And he's like, yeah, you know, it's part of who we are. And do you know how that started?
How?
According to them, it's just because they were lazy. Well, the whole story is they were touring relentlessly from 1969 to 1976. Not a single like month of holidays or anything. Just like touring, and then I think they got a deal with Warner Bros. There was some commercial deals going on, and someone in that management suggested like, you guys should take a break, you know, like wait for the next step of your career, have a bit, like maybe a month out of the road. And they started with like a month, and it became 2 months, and I think it ended up being like a whole year without touring, and which was good for them after 7 years non-stop. But then at that time they just said, it just got lazy, like, oh, we're not, you know, it's like you're not going out anyway, so you're not on tour, you don't need to care about the way you look, so they stopped shaving. That was it. What really annoys me is that the drummer is called Frank Beard, and he's the one without a beard.
Oh god, what a missed opportunity!
Like,
You're in ZZ Top. Your name is
why is
Frank
he
Beard.
Frank Beard?
Come
Is
on.
that can't be his actual name? It's got to be a nickname. So why are you called Frank Beard if you don't have one? That's fine. I mean, yeah.
But you're
So
right. They are an iconic band. Even just, I mean, the really funny thing is that I knew how this album was going to sound before I listened to it.
wow.
Because, and I don't mean song for song, of course, you know, but I mean the general tone.
Yeah.
And because I couldn't tell you the name of a ZZ Top song, I've never listened to them. But when you watch your music documentaries and someone says, you know, they were on the bill with ZZ Top that year, and then you get a 10-second clip of ZZ Top playing, and you can just hear the kind of music that they do.
Yeah.
I've heard little 10-second, 5-second clips of ZZ Top throughout the last how many years. And I literally mean that, 5 to 10 seconds. So when I read that this was their breakthrough album, and this is the album that kind of established them, and for listeners, this album was more than establishing. It really, you know, signified the beginning of their established sound, the sound that people come to know and love ZZ Top for. This is the album that kicked it all off. And so having heard the little clips I've heard before, I came here thinking that, you know what, I get an idea of how this album's going to sound. And actually, the first song threw me off because the first song is quite groovy. It's almost a bit like Grand Funk Railroad that we did a few episodes ago. Very soulful and very soul-y. Roots remain in the blues. And I love that transition in the solo from the harmonica that was really bluesy to the guitar that goes proper rocky. That song threw me off. But then we come down to Jesus Just Left Chicago. And I'm like, right, this is what I thought. This is what I expected to hear when Felipe chose a ZZ Top album. And I think that's a massive, massive testament to their, it has to be to their career, that a person like me who has never listened to them, listened to the album, and obviously you'll hear my opinions on each song when we do it or later in my monologue, but I came away thinking, never heard ZZ Top before. That's how I thought they were going to sound. And now that that's met my expectations, I'm satisfied.
That's good. Good to know.
Yeah, they met my expectations.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we do this podcast, and we're here like recommending each other's some good stuff to listen to.
Always,
you know, because when you talk about classic rock music, there's so much out there. No one knows anything. No one knows like everything about every band that has released you know, extremely successful albums. There's so much to talk about since the beginnings of rock and roll, and I love that the fact we pick different stuff, and it's super fun. So I wasn't that familiar with the whole album, you know, and it was a really good fun album to listen to. It's a short album, 30 something minutes. And the songs, I don't think there's even a song that lasts for 4 minutes or anything like that. They're all really short songs.
Yeah, 4 minutes 06 is the longest one.
There you go.
Everything is under 4 minutes.
Yeah, and I what I find amazing, that's kind of a common element throughout the whole album. You might agree with me, you might not, but tell me what you think. Although there is like really, really cool guitar solos, slide guitar, like bluesy bends, and you have all those elements, and they always make a point about, here's a guitar solo for you. There's always a nice guitar solo, although the vocals are unique. You're not going to hear anyone sounding like that. And despite all of that, they still make it more about the riff and the groove. I believe that's their main thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that, and that's what I think makes this album so rock and roll, is that you can throw in any solo, you can throw in there's something, just quickly, there's something really interesting I read about one of the I don't know, someone involved, no, it was a critic. He wrote this: ZZ Top had an advantage over white rockers because they sounded black.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I love that because his voice is so soulful on some of the songs.
Yeah, well,
it could be the band who was soulful. It could be a black soul singer. I thought his voice really was great, because in places it sounds bluesy and gritty and white, and in other places it sounds soulful and black and really, you know what I mean, boogie and doo-woppy. I loved what he did.
Yeah, if you listen to Freddie King or John Lee Hooker, you can hear that sort of vocals, especially John Lee Hooker. I think it's more raw and aggressive.
Have you got a song we can put in the playlist for everyone?
Oh, you should try Boogie Shilling. You should try This Is Hip is one of my favorites. Yeah, please put it in.
Carry on, please. Yeah, I was just
no, so you got to listen to those classic blues singers, especially John Lee Hooker for this. It's the reference. 300 Pounds of Joy, I think that's the name of the.
I'll put that one in. But yeah, sorry, in answer to your question, yeah, the riff is most important in this album. I think that shows, because every song kicks off with a really stonking riff. Yeah. And I think that's what
every song.
It's not like, and it's not like you get a bass and drums ever starting. It's not like you get it building up in terms of volume. It's not like you get chords strummed like in a progressive way, like a singer-songwriter. It is just riff after riff after riff, and they have such a good way of not making the solo show up the riff. The riff is key always.
Always, yeah. Again. And so is the groove. You do have some like unpredictable moments in terms of drumming in there, because like what you expect for that sort of boogie bluesy vibe is a groove that never changes. You have the backbeat, which is the snare drum on 2 and 4 all the time, and it's not necessarily like that throughout the whole album. Give one example here. Again, we're talking about Master of Sparks, and there's this syncopated kind of uh, vibe on beat 4. So for whoever's a musician, so instead of having the 1, 2, 3, 4, always having that snap on 2 and 4, on the end of the bar, he changes the vibe. It doesn't play the snare drum we expect him to play. So it's a syncopated vibe.
Can you give us an example, like with or do you need more?
Oh, it's just like, no, I think it's just that instead of like you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3. That's one example. So you just displace that beat that you're expecting to be there. It's not there. Now try and do that and still groove and still make that song good enough to keep people dancing. And I think they do that.
That's what's so obvious about things like prog rock is that you very, very rarely will sections of music that have time signature changes, displacement, syncopation, all interspersed. Very rarely will you find a section of music like that in prog that grooves.
Yeah.
And very rarely will you find a straight play drums in Texas blues. But do you know what I mean? It's like that.
So they have it all.
This is a staple signature of grooving. Is a signature sound of blues, Texas blues, boogie rock, whatever you want to say. And the fact that he's doing little things like displacing the beat or the offbeat, so clever, so clever.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think again, when you talk about the riff being the main thing, there's a trend now that I hear in modern blues rock that I see. I'm normally not really harsh with other people's music, but there's a trend with like overcomplicated riffs.
Okay.
To the point you hear the riff, well, that's the intro of the song, and you're like, can you sing along with the riff? No, it's too many notes, and it feels like it doesn't loop, it doesn't repeat itself.
Yeah, I know.
So they make a point. Listen, this is a riff. Sounds great. That's the perfect guitar tone, and I'm gonna play it for 3.5 minutes, and you're gonna bounce to it, and you're gonna have a good time. And I'm gonna sing songs about getting drunk and driving fast cars and all waiting for my bus because I still don't have a Cadillac. Which those are the other elements as well. You listen to the lyrics, like that's the first song, waiting for the bus. There's a line that I love. I'll be riding on that bus till like Cadillac. It's like, how cool is that? I think everyone can relate to that. Everyone can relate to.
It's such an anti rock and roll song, isn't it? As in like waiting for the bus.
Yeah, it is like I want to go through some of the songs. Like we're never going to have time to talk about every single song, but that's a clever line. And when they finish that song, they go straight into Jesus Left Chicago, and it's a complete different song, different vibe. The groove is not the same, but they just made that transition so smooth and just works. And it feels like you're already on their gig.
That was actually a working of Terry Manning, the engineer. Did you read about this?
He came up with that. Was that it?
Yeah, because he was using obviously tape and literally cutting. So for those who don't know, back in the 70s, when you're talking about cutting tape to put an album together, you are literally chopping tape and sticking it back together in the right place. And they do this in movies as well. And then he thought it was really good. Actually, I read it somewhere. I can remember. He said something like he listened to the songs and he got an idea of the flow of the album and the tempo of the album and the vibe it was going for, that he thought, do you know what, the amount of time between track 1 ending and track 2 beginning is too long. so I'm going to cut it. And he cut it, and he was like, I still don't like it. And he cut it ever so much that it came, and it just seamlessly went into the like track one into track two.
Really...
And he was like, oh, do you know what? It works. And I think the producer Bill Ham, he took a bit of a convincing to allow that.
Accept that. I think it's
but
just
it works.
Flows.
It took me by surprise, because I don't think you expect on a rock album, let alone a blues rock album from the early 70s, to have one song segue perfectly into another song. It kind of like song one ended, and I was like, oh,
well, sounds like something, again, that's what I'm saying. It sounds like something you would hear from a British hard rock, classic rock, or prog rock band. So they had those elements. The other thing is, which I think is worth mentioning, and I've watched the interview with Billy Gibbons, where he's going on about the conflict, let's put it like that, the clash between the two cultures at that time in Texas. So you had the hippie culture coming up at the time, and confronting the redneck culture, which was, you know, well established since forever. So and he seems to be a kind of guy who communicates with everything. It's like he doesn't say that like he liked one thing or another. And he said like Willie Nelson was important for that, because he was a guy who could act like a hippie and sing a country song like a redneck.
So, and then, yeah, you get both markets then, don't you?
Again, what is rock and roll, right?
Musical freedom.
You shouldn't have to stick to one thing or another. If you want to, that's still rock and roll. If they said we just want to be rednecks and we're going to play like this, it's rock and roll. But if they liked that the other elements of rock and roll that were common in the hippie culture, and they would bring that. You know, there's some moments you might find funny, but there's some moments that, for me, sound a little bit like Sabbath and Zeppelin, who were releasing that first albums at that time.
Yeah,
you know?
So I hear that. I mean, if what you're saying aligns with what I said earlier about there being some really heavy rock riffs, yeah, I agree with you. You know, it's like, you know, yeah.
I think there is. I just want to make sure I'm checking all my notes here. The song track 7, Precious and Grace, that is, I have described it on my notes as a metal riff. Which
I hear that completely.
You a metalhead might not think it is, and it's a song that changes the vibe completely halfway through, and it becomes a double tempo thing. And so look at that. It sounds like, in my opinion, sounds like Sabbath and Zeppelin at the beginning a little bit, because the influences are the same. You've got to consider that. They probably didn't know about each other. I don't know which albums were being released at the time, but they have that plus kind of British rock vibe mixed with blues at the beginning, and it goes double tempo, which is like changing the tempo of a song. It's a very experimental thing that you normally don't do. They did it really well, and when that double tempo part comes, or not a double tempo, sorry, when
it goes boogie,
it does, it's double tempo. It's like, and they go back to it. But the thing is, when the double tempo bit starts, there's this slide solo, which is super traditional, which is a country thing, you know, and it's like, why not? Because it sounds good altogether. And that's the problem, right? I'm going to be a devil's advocate here. That's the problem with things like our show, right? Because we're here talking about something that is practically impossible to describe. I love doing this, but, you know, the thing about music, I doubt those guys were over analyzing it and like, oh, you know, what if we go slightly more country here?
Yeah.
And
I don't think it works that way.
Play, you just go.
That's what they do. But it's funny because, so what did you say? Like our show, what we can do is very easily identify and say, okay, well, this little riff here, that's a hard rock or a heavy metal riff. And this part here, you know, for example, the middle section of Precious and Grace, I thought that for me was just complete boogie rock, like when it goes double tempo.
Yeah.
And you can just identify these parts, but ultimately what this album does so successfully is it executes it under one guy's and I would call that rock and roll.
Yeah.
I
It
feel that they've done perfect levels of everything. And I'm not saying that to have a to have a rock and roll album, you need 30% rock, 30% blues, 30% soul, and what my percentages, 10%. Well, I didn't do well in maths.
we're
Yeah.
not doing the
This
maths
is a
here, but
music show, not a maths show. And
we're gonna
10%,
get to
yeah,
135%.
exactly, yeah. And 10% country, for example. I'm not saying rock and roll has to have that. It might be skewed. It might be 50% rock, and then the others will go smaller. But it's just about the way you combine them and execute it. Because remember, what I always go back to the conversation we had about the Animals, and as brilliant as the Animals were, and as much as I enjoy them, I always felt it was obvious going through those that greatest hits album. It was obvious that, okay, this is a song that is inspired by Ray Charles and the old soul of the 60s, whereas this is a song that is inspired by the blues movement in America, and this is a pop song. It felt like every song that it felt to me like the Animals actually went, okay, for this song we're going to write a psychedelic rock song, here we go. For this one we're going to write a doo-wop song, here we go. Whereas, and don't get me wrong, there's a whole other conversation, that's still rock and roll in itself, but what ZZ Top have done here is just find the perfect blend of country, soul, blues, rock,
Is when you
and
is when
formed
you
a great rock and roll album.
is when someone cooks a meal with the right amount of every ingredient and the right amount of it's like
Yeah,
it's a perfect balance. They didn't mess up with that balance at any point in the album, and
I agree.
I think that is yeah, well, hats off to ZZ Top.
Yeah, you do that.
So,
Song wise,
it's just so well balanced and it's groovy all the way.
yeah,
Do you think? Another question for you? Do you think? Because you asked me why I believe that's why this album was such a breakthrough for them, and like looking back now, I believe there's a lot to do with production. What do you think?
I agree with you because I think the production is so crisp for its time.
Yeah,
The guitar tone, wow. I struggled to believe. Remember what was I can't remember the last episode we did, but I mentioned one of the previous episodes we did about I mentioned that the guitar tone from like a 70s album reminded me of Dire Straits because of how good the production was. And I get the same thing here, man. When we did that Dire Straits album, we commented on how fantastic the production was. And that was just making his guitar sound good. And I think all they've done here, really, if you boil it down, obviously there's loads more work that we can commend the production for. But ultimately, he's just made the guitar sound great. I think that carries the album.
They put the guitar in your face with great quality,
and it never leaves.
The right amount of heaviness. It's never too heavy. It's never too soft. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
And it's always rock and roll through and through. And I think, the other thing I really want to talk about some lines in the song, some of the lyrics. Like we're talking.
Let's talk about some songs then. Yeah.
Yeah, this like the. One of my favorite lines is Jesus left Chicago. It's like Jesus left Chicago and he's bound for New Orleans. So it's just the whole to picture that.
I know.
It's amazing. And when you go into the third song, we talk about a lot about the first two. When you get into the third song, Beer Drinkers and Hell Raisers, it's when the album for me picks up some pace. It starts to get, we're not that slow, we're trying to, it's slightly faster, it's a riff based song again, it's heavy and it's kind of threatening. I love the sound. It's as dark as it gets for a band like them.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there. That's a good word. Yeah, threatening.
It's threatening. There's a stop before the chorus, like they're making a point. Listen, here comes the chorus, and it's an invitation to join that group of hell raisers. We're gonna go and have a good time misbehaving all night. Just come and join us.
Drink beer and raise hell. Yeah, why not?
I think it was easier to kind of join them before the beard, I guess. I don't know. I would be a bit scared if I didn't know them, and they invite me to join them for the night. But yeah, it's again pure rock and roll all the way. And we talked about Master of Sparks, which is the fourth track. The fifth track of the album, Hot Blue and Righteous,
Oh yeah,
is an emotional, slow blues, isn't it? That's less rock than anything else in the album, in my opinion.
definitely more boogie and doo-wop, isn't it? It has a very 50s feel to it.
Yeah, and it's, there's the emotion. They had influences of rhythm and blues, and
I just think they probably, yes, sorry, I think they have the same influence as the band, as Elvis, from that part of the country. I know the band are from Canada, but the cultures are align.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was really nice, Hot Blue and Righteous. Moving on down the line, I thought that was very, very typical pop rock, very Rolling Stonesy. I thought that one, really enjoyed it. Just your signature guitar riff with an upbeat feel to it. Made you feel good after you listened to it.
It does. Do you know, there's a thing about this song is like, they have very simple but effective vocal harmonies. But that, like, you're more than halfway through the album, and it's the first time for me that the vocal harmonies, they stand out. They seem to be like one of the major elements in the song right at this point. So there's always something surprising you as you move on into the album, and it's like, it really surprised me. At that point, it was like, oh, wait a minute, some nice harmonies there. I like that.
I think they introduced them in the song before.
Yeah,
but it's a different kind of song.
It doesn't stand out as much,
exactly, because it seems appropriate for the song, doesn't it? It's like a soulful, slow song. You're going to add harmonies, but for a upbeat, fast tempo song like Moving On Down the Line, you don't expect them to be so good, do you?
No, not at all.
Excellent. Any other songs you want to mention, bro?
Man, you're going to talk me about the 9th song in the album. What do you think about that one? You got any notes? Do you remember which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, Shake.
Yeah.
I
what really, about that song?
I enjoyed the unorthodox guitar solo. I thought
unorthodox. That's a great definition.
Yeah, the jam.
There's a wah-wah pad on that solo.
I didn't know if it was a wah-wah or the voice thing that we mentioned about Peter Frampton.
Is it a talk box?
Don't know. Didn't look into it, but
I don't know what it is, but it's very expressive, and he makes the most of every note, and it's a funky number. Some of the rhythm guitar parts. Sounds so much like James Brown to me, believe me or not.
Well, there's a whole jammy vibe to it where they just you sat there and you feel like they're just jamming in the studio at this section, getting it out and sort of playing the solo over it. Really enjoyed that one.
And they finished with another blues.
Yeah, but this one I just felt a little more doo-wop and boogie compared to some of the other blues stuff we heard.
Interesting.
I don't know why. Maybe it's the vocals. But yeah, man. Really
there's so much to dig. You can listen to the album 10 times in a row, and then you're still going to find some things. But here's the thing. I believe there's a simplicity to all of it.
The first line of my monologue's going to say the same
thing. Is that
it?
They're not trying to sound like a 10-piece band. Not many overdubs. It's a power trio playing together for the whole album. You don't have much... the production, for me, the value of the production in this album is trying to capture the real sound of this band, not try to make them sound like something else, not add too much to how they originally sound like.
You're correct.
That's the value of the production in this album. That's why it made it so good.
You're correct, but they also succeeded in that other part you mentioned.
What are you talking about?
You just said that the production was meant to sound make them sound like a band, without focusing on polished sounds. Or
exactly.
But they succeeded in making his guitar sound really good.
Exactly what I'm saying. But it's a band. It's like a 3-piece band.
But you're
sounding
right.
like that.
Yeah.
It's not
ultimately
like
it comes across as a live performance, doesn't it? Like
exactly.
They also nailed the tones.
You have that crystal clear guitar sound that you can only get in studio, but you don't just put like shitloads of layers of guitar.
You don't lose the essence of it.
No, exactly. It's raw. It's you can hear the hat and the beard.
Excellent. That's it. Do you know what? I'm going to change the title of this episode. The title of this episode was going to be called Drink Beer and Raise Hell. But tell me, what was that again? You can hear the hat,
The hat
and the
and the
beard.
beard.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the title of this episode. You can hear the hat and the beard. There we go. Courtesy of Mr. Felipe Amorim. Oh, man.
Hence my outfit for today. I was growing my beard for this episode. I've used this joke before.
Yeah, for those watching on YouTube, have a look. Check him out. Turn to the side, Felipe, so we can see the stature of it. No. Turn your head so we can see.
Oh, my. You want to see the hat?
No. Turn your head like that so we can see
Yeah.
how big your beard is.
Oh, the beard.
And that, look at that. If you're right, if you're listening to this, you got to head over to YouTube and check this out. He's been growing this for months.
Yeah. And it was actually, can I tell you the true story about this?
Tell us the story. Let's finish with
take the kids out of the room. No, basically, I was playing a gig with my good friend Andy Diablo, who plays guitar in my blues band.
Shout out to Andy.
Yeah. And is a good man. He's American, by the way, so he grew up listening to all that stuff, ZZ Top, and he has a gigantic beard, and we've finished the set, and he was like, I was like, man, that beard is something, isn't it? It's like, it keeps growing, and he was like, yeah, you should do the same. We would be like the ZZ Top of London, and the truth has to be said, I might have had a couple of extra drinks that night. And I said, you know what? It sounds great. I'm going to do this. And I'm a man of my word. So here I am. Because of ZZ Top, I now have this beard. So
Felipe and Andy are the ZZ Top of Soho, for listeners. And this is true. They gig everywhere, every night. They're always around Soho playing in blues bands. This is the house band drummer of Soho. Listeners, just seeing how lucky you are to have this guy on our podcast.
Oh, come on. For those watching, here's a picture. Here's a
picture. Who's that? Oh, that's Andy. There you go.
It's a sticker on my phone.
If you're ever in Soho, get yourself down to one of the blues bars, and I'm sure you'll find the ZZ Top of Soho.
Yeah, we always the ZZ Top of London playing some boogies for you guys. But yeah, thanks for promoting the gigs. Right. Yeah, you're not going to find us on the internet. But unlike my band, you can find ZZ Top on the internet. So like as we normally say, look it up. Find those guys, dig into their music, because if any of you guys listening if you're a huge fan of ZZ Top, you might not have heard anything new from this episode. If you know the band but don't know them that much, or if you've never heard of them and you just listen to this first, if this is your first album, your first contact with ZZ Top, go and check them out. There's a reason why they are like iconic.
I have to agree with that. And do you know what? I have to. Are you done? Do you want to say anything else?
I want to say one thing. One experience I had. I went to, I think, was it that venue in Shepherd's Bush? Got the name of it. Big venue in Shepherd's Bush. Anyway, I was there watching a gig. I think it's the O2 Academy or something like that.
Yeah.
So I was watching a gig. It was the Supersonic Blues Machine, and Billy Gibbons is like a guest musician singing in that band. They have Kenny Arnold from drums. They that night they had Chris Barris, whom we toured as a support act for him, and those guys are just like kicking ass. And Billy Gibbons comes at the end of the gig for 2 songs. And when that man walks on stage, you can feel the presence of rock and roll. And it's like everyone went nuts. It was a great gig. But when Billy Gibbons walked on stage, and you can see the respect that the musicians have for him and the love that the audience has for him. And is a simple man. He's just, he's just another Texan guitar player. Happens to be one of the best.
There you go. There you go. Fantastic. Right. Well, I'll finish off with my monologue then. Yeah.
Yes.
And what I wanted to precede this monologue, what I wanted to say before I say this is the hilarious thing about this whole episode we've done is that I haven't told you that actually I don't really like the album. I wouldn't listen to it again. It's not my sort of music.
Shocking! Shocking! I'm leaving the room now.
That's it. Goodbye. Switch your camera. Yeah. You got
I
to
left.
come back. You left, he said. The funny thing is that I can't help but praise the hell out of this album, regardless of whether I'd listen to it again. It's not my sort of thing, so I probably wouldn't. But I can't help but just praise the shit out of this album, and I'm going to do so in my monologue. I think sometimes rock music can ask a lot of you. You look at prog with its long song lengths, virtuosic sections, and time signature changes. Hard rock with lots of minor chords, loud volume and attitude, and dissonance if you want to kind of mold it towards the heavy metal side. Psychedelic rock with the trippy atmosphere and the immersive sounds. And you come out of each experience having a newfound understanding of certain elements of those, the long solos, the heavy riffs, the atmospheric sounds. But the kind of rock I hear when I listen to this album is the kind of rock that I think people enjoy for the simplicity of it, whilst also achieving things like good solos, heavy riffs, and a cool atmosphere. Less is more, and it shines through on Tres Hombres. There is nothing demanding or taxing about listening to this album. It's a fun experience, and your head will be swinging, your foot will be tapping, and I don't see anyone being able to resist doing either of those things at some point in the album. For me, this is the people's rock music. I think it does the absolute perfect job of combining rock, blues, and soul. You can't ever differentiate, and there are very few moments where you say, "Ah, this is pure blues," or "Oh, this is pure hard rock." It has a natural blend to it that I think gives it great character. I knew very, very little of ZZ Top before this episode, but the album is exactly how I expected it to be because I knew that this is what they were about. Because of those blends of styles, you've got true rock and roll here, musical freedom to explore and venture beyond the confines of singular genres and amalgamate them into a product. Simultaneously, this album furthers the work of Chuck Berry and Little Richard, whilst integrating itself with Zeppelin and the Stones, but also paving the way for fresh rock music to come about with its soulfulness and boogie. It ticks all the boxes of being a historically significant and important rock and roll album. And so the highest praise I can give it is that if someone were to ever come to me and say, give me an album that for you encapsulates the spirit, meaning, and actual music elements of rock and roll, then I would hand them a copy of Tres Hombres.
Well done.
And all of that for an album that I don't really care for. I feel like that is this is the best album I haven't liked. Does that make sense? Does this make sense? The song.
I'll tell you this last. My dream is to get every just kind of listen back to the episodes, find every time you said, "No, I'm not really a big fan of this album," and invite the artist who wrote the album to have to be a special guest in one of our shows. Like, here's Billy Gibbons. By the way, Laz doesn't like Tres Hombres. What do you think of it?
Well, we should, yeah. Why not? I mean, I don't know how I can defend myself, but listen, I know we're joking, but it is all about taste, and this kind of the light blues, classic rock isn't really my thing. But like I said, I just can't help but praise it because of what it's done. Like I said, that the most important part for me in my monologue was they're still celebrating Chuck Berry and Little Richard, but they're also level in a different kind of category with Zeppelin and the Stones. But they're also making music in this album that is going to make other rock musicians go, wow, we've got to try that, and pioneer other genres. I'm so impressed, man. Honestly, I was really, really impressed. I kind of looked at them from what I knew, like I said, those little 5-second clips here and there. I looked at them and thought, it's just going to be like cheesy blues or like a blues that's a bit heavier, a bit rockier. But man, like I said for the third time, I can't praise it highly enough.
Yeah.
I want to ask you one final question. What is I think we've said plenty of why this album is rock and roll, but for you, what is the most rock and roll thing about this album?
Ooh, tough one. That is a difficult question.
Because we've said lots, but you got to pick one. What one stands out the most for you?
Oh, man, I would say the riff.
I knew you. I was thinking that as well. That was going to be my answer.
The intro of Lagrange. That's it. That's that one chord riff. That it feels like they just jamming. The best thing about ZZ Top that they enjoy jamming. just improvising and playing on top of a basic idea. So
seeing where the
I
song
think
goes.
any riff from this album, you can just jam to it. Any musician can just play the one small fraction of any of those songs and play it for half an hour, recreating it and having fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's the ability of grooving for the whole album and coming up with amazing riffs that happen to be really simple. That's the rock and rollness of the album.
There you go. Guys, thank you once again for joining us on another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. As you can see at the bottom of your screen, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to us on YouTube to keep up to date with all the latest news and content. If you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify or Google or Amazon podcasts, give us a review, please, because any little review helps us go up the charts. Higher in the algorithms. We're going to be seen by more people. We're an independent podcast, and we do it because we absolutely love talking about music, and we know that you guys like listening to us talk about music because you tune in every couple of weeks. So yeah, please do all you can to give us a little boost in whatever platform you're using us on. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and thanks for all the support so far. And I didn't think we would made it to this point. I think we were just like have an argument, never speak to each other again, and we're here doing this show. And although Laz dislikes some of the albums I choose,
as soon as I end this, Felipe's going to come at me through the screen.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so I hope everyone enjoyed it. Remember, guys, buy a hat, grow a beard, don't do anything I wouldn't do, and keep on rocking.
Yes, I love that last line. I love it. Guys, take care, and as always, long live rock and roll.